remember that the commandments that God puts into place are there to protect. So God is protecting something when it comes to the 10 commandments. And just as a review, we'll get this down so that we make sure we remember what we were talking about. So the first three are dealing with our relationship with God, right? Our relationship with God. So in a way, it is protecting the relationship with God. And what we have to remember there, though, is when it comes to protecting the relationship with God, He is always the catalyst of what we need in order to have that relationship with Him. So when we say, we have to protect our relationship with God, or sometimes we might talk with the words, I want to grow my faith, I want to enrich my faith. It's okay to talk like that, but what we have to remember is our faith is not necessarily our possession. Faith is something that is constantly being poured out to you as a gift. And so where I always go is Mark 16:16. All who believe and are baptized will be saved. As you hear those words, God is giving you through that word the very faith that you need to believe that. And that's how God's word works. Now, that doesn't mean like all of a sudden you're going to be like, oh, okay, yeah, I believe all of a sudden. Well, does it work that way? It can. But the more we're in the word, the more His word is enriching our faith, also receiving the sacrament. That's why we say word and sacrament. So first three, relationship with God. And oh, by the way, sorry that I'm casually dressed tonight. I've been scrambling around this week and I'm hot and sweaty and didn't want to change into nice clothes. So you get ugly pastor today. Not ugly dressed up pastor, ugly dressed down pastor. So first three commandments, relationship with God. And then you have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And commandment 4 was protecting God's gift of authority. 5 is protecting God's gift of life. 6, God's gift of sexuality/marriage. 7, God's gift of stuff or possessions. Stuff is easier to spell. And 8, God's gift of reputation. And then commandments 9 and 10 is God's desire for us to be content with all that He gives to us through everything that He promises. So if you look at it, really, when you look at, and this is the beauty of the catechism, really, and how Luther constructed the catechism. So the 10 commandments are in place, obviously, as God's law, right? And it's His good and gracious will for our lives. And when we remember God's law as His good and gracious will for our lives, we remember that it's not something that's bad. It is bad when it's accusing us, but it's His desire for us to live perfectly with Him. And the way that He does that then is eventually when we get to the Lord's Prayer, we know the fourth petition of the Lord's Prayer is, give us this day our daily bread, right? So if you look at this part of the commandments is all of your daily bread. And then the 9th and 10th commandment is God saying, be content with what I've given you. So it's really cool how that all pieces itself together when we start thinking about it in that way. So today, in the 7th commandment, you shall not steal. We should fear and love God so that we do not take our neighbor's money or possessions or get them in any dishonest way, but help him and to improve and protect. That, I would say, is the most important part of the emphasis that Luther was making in the meaning, because it's not so much in, it is that we are not to take from anyone, but it's more about helping this person improve, helping them improve and then protect what they have. So The way that I talk about it a lot is everything that we have, so all of the daily bread that we have, the gifts that we have, we are given for a twofold purpose. One, for us to be taken care of, but two, so that we can take care of our neighbors.
So the neighbor that was in your house the other day that you were mad at.
Correct.
There was fire,
Right.
that
Yes.
was helping you improve.
Yes.
Your
In the
house.
middle of chaos, when the neighbor's house is burning and my house is almost burning and people are in my house telling me there's a fire, and I turn around and say, yes, thank you. I get that. Why are you in my house? I understand that I have an apology to make. I don't know who the person is, so, but I randomly apologized to whoever it was that I barked that was in my house, who thought I was dumb and didn't see the fire. But nonetheless, yes, they meant well. So, first and foremost, with this commandment, with the seventh commandment, we must be able to confess that everything we have is a gift from God. Absolutely everything we have is a gift from God. And some people might say, well, but I work really hard. I've worked a lifetime to have what I have, to save what I have. Well, that's true, but who gave you the ability to work? And that's one of the ways in which God allows us and gives us daily bread. He gives us the ability to do what's needed to be able to provide for ourselves and provide for our neighbors. And so look at 2 Thessalonians 3, 10-12. 2 Thessalonians 3, 10-12.
Thank you. Sure. Sue's on the cabin too.
Second Thessalonians 3, 10-12. For even when we were with you, we would give you this command: if anyone is not willing to work, let him not eat. For we hear that some among you walk in idleness, not busy at work, but busy bodies. Now such persons we command and encourage in the Lord Jesus Christ to do their work quietly and to earn their own living. So God's word is very clear about you carrying your part. I would say that's a big struggle in our culture, especially, and I would say that was magnified with COVID and all of the extra handouts that came as a part of that. Now, some of those handouts were absolutely necessary for some entities and some people, but there's a lot of places now that are really struggling to find people to work, because I don't mind living in poverty when that poverty is given completely to me and I don't have to do a thing. But God's word is very clear about that. So when it comes to having everything that we need, our daily bread, God gives us the ability to work. He also, at times, will give us gifts. You know, there are times that we do inherit things from people who have worked hard and then leave it to us. And that's something for us to remember as well. But first and foremost, we must remember that what we have is a gift, and part of the way we have it is the gift to be able to do what we have. Now, living in America, in the Western culture, we very much live in this world of what we could say is mine and yours. Mine.
There we go.
Who invited my wife? Mine and yours. Okay. Now, is there truth to this? Are the clothes that I'm wearing mine? Yes. Right? Could I give them to someone? Absolutely. But they are, for all intents and purposes, mine, meaning that if you were to walk in my house and take them from me. We have laws in our land that say, don't do that. That's against the law. That's stealing. That's what we're talking about. Not just laws in our land, but natural law that God gave to us. And what's yours is yours. I can't just go out into the parking lot and decide, oh, I've always wanted a really nice SUV. So this school family has a really nice SUV. So I'm going to take the Nico's GMC home and use it how I want to now. And someone then can take my Explorer that doesn't have the air conditioning working and they can be happy with it. So, but that's not how that goes. Now, according to Jesse, he's given me the okay and saying, hey, we should, I mean, yes, ride, share. And if you think about it, back when the church started, very shortly after Pentecost, when you had the church coming together, they sold everything and they did live as a community. What people needed, that's what they had. But because of sin, we know this, there's a big divide between mine and yours, right? Now, what I want you to think about is this. What does this look like? Looks like a fence, right? Looks like a fence. There's a little bit of a glare there, isn't there? But sorry, it's not a perfect setup, but I'm trying. But there's a fence. Now, it's not a wall, okay? It's purposely a fence because what can you do with a fence? A fence clearly marks boundaries, and that's biblical. There's a biblical narrative that talks about how we are not to move property lines and stuff like that. There is division of property, but when it comes to a fence, what I like about this image that was shared with me is it clearly delineates what is mine and what is yours, but I can still reach over and through it to give you what you might need, just as you can share with me what I might need. So, in the sense that it is mine and yours, we always have to remember that it is God's. And God has given us what we have in order to bless those around us. So perhaps there's so many really fascinating stories that have come out of the last few days with this fire next to us and the fire with the steeple. But as you know, I have wanted to make sure that the attention is directed on those who have lost everything that they have. And the other day, Molly and I got here after spending our first night out of our home, and someone walked up to us and said, I'm looking for the pastor, because I was dressed similarly and they couldn't tell who the pastor was. And I said, well, that's me. And he said, well, how are the people doing? And I said, I think they're doing okay. I've been able to communicate with them and talk to them. Do you know any of their immediate needs? And I just shared a few things, and there wasn't any great immediate needs other than a house. But we had the prayer service. We had started raising some money. We had gotten a lot of donations that night for the one family with the children. And this man says, so if I were to give you some cash, that would be able to go to these people. Yeah. And the man pulls out of his pocket, random man, I don't know who he is, pulls out of his pocket $3,800 in 20s and just says, here, give this to these families. So then that doubled what we raised the night before. So just a wonderful blessing there. And this is a man that clearly operates with the understanding of what is mine is certainly a blessing for me. I am going to give it to other people.
Well, the verse that popped into my head was, "So much is given, much will be required."
Right.
If that Jesus.
Yep.
Where that says.
Well, just like the parable of the talents, whoever has more was expected of them, right? And that's just, this man understood that. And we have a lot of generous people that are coming forward. And then, lo and behold, too, without even asking, we're getting donations for the steeple as well. So there are people who are moved by what has happened. And because one of the ways we do steal from God is when we hoard and when we keep what we have because we're worried about our own livelihood. And when we're worried about our own livelihood, sometimes it makes us be more internally focused than realizing that even if I have nothing, or if I give someone my last dollar, I am still tremendously blessed because God will continue to give to me. Does it mean I might be a bit uncomfortable? Yes, if I'm used to living a particular way. It absolutely will. So that hints at one of the ways that we are able to break this commandment. So obviously, we're able to break the seventh commandment by stealing, physically stealing, but also by being lazy or sloppy. So if you think about being at work, if you're employed, or you can apply this to anything. You can even apply it as being a stay-at-home mom. If you are lazy at doing your job as a stay-at-home mom or an employee and you're not doing the best you can do, well, you're stealing from those around you who are counting on God's gifts that he has given you to serve them, or being sloppy. That what comes to mind for me is my two sons work at Dura Supreme, and one of them is a builder. And when he first started, he built pretty slow because he was worried about quality. He wanted it to be quality product because he had seen some reviews on Dura's website and didn't want himself to be the reason people didn't have a quality cabinet. So, but then shortly after, he was told, you have to move faster. We need to make more. And so he had to learn the balance of quality and being able to produce quality, but yet push it out, and not necessarily, but he didn't want to be sloppy with it. Ephesians 4:28 says, let the thief no longer steal, but rather let him labor, doing honest work with his own hands, so that he may have something to share with anyone in need. So I think most of us have probably experienced something along the lines of, we buy a product, we get it home and find out the product is much junkier than what we thought it was because of the type of work that was put into it. Dishonesty is another way that we break this commandment. That's by taking advantage of others. This event that happened this week, there could be plenty of people now that will want to come and try to take advantage of people hurting. The one gal, Kayla, told us this morning that someone's already taken her identity and taken her credit card information. So it's not enough that this first-time home buyer has only lived in their home for 19 days and it's burned down. Now someone's taking her stuff.
Is it related, do you think?
No, it just, some of it could be, I don't know. And it could be coincidental, but that's dishonesty, right? That's fraud. So obviously then you flip that over, and the way that we uphold the seventh commandment is we help others. We're honest and we're willing to share when we are in need. One of the areas that and I just touched on it, one of the areas that the seventh commandment has gotten to be more of an issue is in the area of technology when it comes to intellectual property, like the stealing of music and, like for us as a church, we can steal by not, if I just took a hymnal and made a bunch of photocopies of the hymn and passed it out Sunday morning, that's illegal. That's stealing. But we have a license to be able to do it because we had bought the software that they provide. And so Sunday morning, when we're worshiping at school, the printed order that we will have is legal because we have the rights to it. Even I think most of us are guilty with this. All of us probably pull images off the internet and use them for things, and we don't give credit to where that came from. Technically, that's stealing someone's property. Although you can find some sites out there that will give you free pictures and stuff like that. But just to summarize quickly, the seventh commandment then, everything that you have is yours by way of God giving it to you, I would say for four main reasons. That he has blessed you with material items. First and foremost, to be able to provide for your family, and then obviously others outside of your family, and then church, so that the ministry can continue to go on. And then also tied into this is creation. God has given us creation, and he desires for us to continue to support creation. And the way we can do that is through the likes of conservation and supporting different things that help creation maintain what it is. All right. Any questions about the seventh commandment?
I found that verse. It's at the end of the thing about the wise manager, the faithful and wise manager.
Yep.
So talking about his master will set him over the household to give him their portion of where the proper time, like you're talking about the household or the family or whatever. At the very end of, there's like an 8-verse chunk at the end of this. No, it's not at the end. It's in kind of smack in the middle of Luke 12. Man, it's
Luke 12. The
48, the second half of verse 48, it's
Luke 12:48.
receiving a beating. It says, but the one who did not know and did what deserved a beating will receive a lighter beating. Everyone to whom much was given, of him much will be required, and from him to whom they entrusted much, they will demand the more.
Right.
It almost sounds like a negative context, not a positive, but.
Well, I mean, it can be, but yes, that's just a way to summarize that teaching there in Luke 12 is the amount that you have been given is the amount that you've been expected to serve
Steward.
and be able to, you're a manager over. But there's a balance to that. There's a balance to you've been given to be able to provide for yourself and your family, your daily bread, but then there's also the desire, the need to take care of. But in the Western culture, we are so forward that's a wrong way to say it. Forward thinking in the sense of, I need to make sure that my nest is good, right? But how many times have you heard of people that they get all the way to retirement, they have built up a big retirement, and weeks into retirement, they die. Or they end up not even being able to enjoy what they have saved up because of health or something like that. So that's why I always say, live now. Be smart, but live now. If there's something you really want to do, do it. God's giving you the ability to do it. Obviously, be responsible with it, but live as he's allowing you to live. Right. All right, the 8th commandment then, you shall not give false testimony against your neighbor. What does this mean? We should fear and love God so that we do not tell lies about our neighbor, betray him, slander him, or hurt his reputation, but defend him, speak well of him, and explain everything in the kindest way. Here's a quote from Mark Twain. One of the striking differences between a cat and a lie is that a cat has only 9 lives. So the point there being, the lie lives on, whether people want to believe it or not. And then I believe it's a quote from Mark Twain. He goes on to say, after 2 years of life, we learn to talk, but then we spend the rest of our days on earth trying to control our mouth, which is, I think, a very wise observation there. Language is a gift. We just got through Pentecost and saw the need for Pentecost because there was a misuse of the gift of language. When all mankind could speak one language, they came together and they disregarded what God had told them to do, which was to disperse over the earth and multiply. And they decided to come together and stay in one spot. And so in that way, language was misused, and God had to confuse the language in order to force them to be able to remain distant and apart. But language and speech are gifts that can be used to great good. That's how we communicate the blessings of God to people. but it can also be something that's very, very bad. You've heard the phrase, sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Hogwash. That's one of the worst lies we ever taught, because the reality is, and you've heard me say this before, I wish my stepfather would have continued beating me when I got bigger, rather than turning to psychological abuse and words abuse, because those stick with you longer, and those mess with you and can really hurt you. And so that's why it may not seem like a big deal to kids sometimes, and they may think adults are overreacting around them, but it's very important that we help steer the language of our people. And I think that's one of the biggest areas where our culture is under attack, the changing of the language and how we talk. Words have meaning, and we are working, or many evil forces around us are working to change the language and what those words mean. But the eighth commandment, first and foremost, just besides not calling people bad names, gets to our reputation. And why is a reputation important? Well, your reputation is important so that each of us can enjoy the trust and respect of others. You all probably have in your life someone that does not have a good reputation, and you don't trust them. You can't trust them because maybe they have lied to you time and time again, or they haven't followed through with what you have said, they have said they would do. And so that's a big challenge, because then that person ends up being someone that can't be counted on. But even in that, the hard part that we are called to do is still protect a person's reputation, even when we know that they are doing something that is not right. Now, one way to think of this is how when our kids were little, we always said, when they would come to us, Mom, Dad, so-and-so is doing this, we would stop and we would say, are you tattling in or are you tattling out? And for us, what that was all about is, are you tattling to get someone into trouble? Or are you tattling to get them out of trouble? And if you're trying to get them out of trouble, I need to know that, yes. But if you're tattling to get them into trouble, I need you to go back to them and you work out whatever situation it is going on between the two of you, because that's the relationship aspect about it that God desires from all of us. Any questions about that or thoughts?
Proverbs that talk about a good name being
Right.
beneficial. I can't find a single one.
Yeah, there are a bunch about Proverbs. 22:1, a good name is to be chosen rather than great riches, and favor is better than silver or gold. That's a wonderful verse, Proverbs 22:1, especially in light of the seventh commandment, in the sense of, why would you steal to begin with? Because you desire what other people have. And then here on the tails of that, we have the eighth commandment that says your name actually is better than all of those riches. Because at the end of the day, here's the thing to remember about your name. Why do you have a name to begin with?
My great grandmother was a Catholic.
Okay, so yeah, there's sentiment, sentimentality. What?
Still a Catholic in my entire family too.
Sure. So your name has sentimentality to it. Your name might have identity, yes. So just like we were talking about the neighbor down the road, someone has taken her name and anything associated with it. So just basic identity. And I've used this word already, but reputation. You know, if someone says Bud Grant, anybody that's a sports person around Minnesota and was a Vikings fan, you know, has immediate association for that name. This isn't a person's name, but if I say John Deere or Case, I immediately set off a World War III between farmers, because one is better than the other, apparently. Or same with Ford and Chevy. Actually, I just made that joke after the funeral because all of the Miller family drives Fords, and a bunch of their friends and relatives were pulling up in Chevys, and I just asked Tyler how he puts up with that, and he says, we deal with it, but they just have to repair theirs more than mine. But so a couple of these things, obviously with a name, but the bigger part to remember about your name is your identity as a child of God. And this is the part that must be at the forefront of all of our interactions with other people. Because when I am looking at someone who is being a putz, who's really irritating me, really maybe even a pretty bad person, I must remember that at the heart of it, they are a child of God. Now, here's the challenge with this, because we're also going to struggle with the sentimentality of, or not sentiment, the idea that, well, they certainly don't look like or act like a child of God. I don't see them in church. I don't see this. I don't see that. But what we have to remember is, even when it comes to our name, there's an objectivity to it and a subjectivity to it. Objectively speaking, don't look at my spelling. Objectively speaking, yes, it is in Hebrew. Okay.
The second.
Objectively, that's Chinese actually. Objectively speaking, everyone is a child of God because they are a creature of God, right? Subjectively speaking, however, we know that on Judgment Day, the sheep and the goats will be separated. In the meantime, as we live our lives, we are to treat everyone as if they are a child of God. Now, we all do have scripture, though, that says if someone continues to cause division or is evil, we avoid them. That doesn't necessarily mean, though, that gives us the ability then to break the 8th commandment. Avoiding someone doesn't mean that then I get to slander them. Okay, I've talked about this quite a bit when it comes to reconciliation, for instance. There will be times that you have a broken relationship and you'll reconcile that relationship to the extent of you are able to talk about it, you're able to say sorry to one another, you're able to have forgiveness, but you're not going to be best friends. You're not always going to go have coffee together. You're not going to necessarily seek them out, and you may not even trust them anymore because of how they've hurt you. But you still must protect their reputation.
So sometimes it involves slight deception in order to protect the reputation. Like if I see, there's a complete hypothetical, none of them would do this, but if I saw someone who was on the board of elders in the narthex just cussing somebody out after church and stormed out, and then someone else walks in who wasn't there and says, "What just happened?" Is it truthful to say exactly what I saw and heard, or is it more, or I guess not truthful, but is it more
Right.
biblical to?
Okay, this is no, this is a great example. So Molly's example is Bill Wickesburg is in the narthex and Jesse Pettit walks in, and for whatever reason, Bill is having a really bad day, and he, in front of everyone, just cusses Jesse out. And Jesse leaves, walks by someone. Jesse says this is a true story. Jesse walks by someone, he's visibly upset, and that person comes in the building, walks in, sees that Bill's kind of red in the face, which he always is, and says, "What just happened?" Or you witness it. So Molly witnesses it, and someone comes to her and says, "What just happened?" Am I to lie and say, "I don't know what happened"? Or how do we uphold the 8th commandment? The way you uphold the 8th commandment is What just happened is between those two men. You need to go talk to those two men. And
So
that's,
they might tell a different version of the story.
well, they might, but that's between, right. But it's not for you to tell the story. I've been asked numerous times if I know how the fire started. I don't. I've heard rumors, but it would not be right for me to share those rumors with anyone. As far as, because I've had news reporters ask, and I just simply say, I don't know. Because the truth is, I wasn't there. I don't know. Right? Just like, I mean, even though you are a witness, if you were to witness something, I would probably, had I witnessed how the fire started, if it was a person that I want to protect their reputation, I don't know. I mean, at the end of the day, why does the city of Howard Lake need to know how the fire started? Right? Or any other community. The reality is, two families have lost their homes. Let's be thankful for what is, and let the powers that be figure out all of the need to know stuff. See, this is one of the things that I think, and this is where the eighth commandment is so challenging for us in our current time, is social media has just exasperated and expanded the moral and ethical boundaries of what people say is right and wrong. You want to see that at all, just go read the Howard Lake community page, and good gravy, it just, you will see very quickly how things are damaging. So on the flip side, though, of the betraying and the slandering and the telling of lies, our ears, it's been said, I think Luther, this is a Luther quote possibly, our ears are to be an open grave to matters that don't pertain to us. So there will be things that we hear, and I get it. We like to be, we know who the busybodies are around us. They're the people who just like to know, and they need to know everything. And when they don't know everything, they're freaking out because someone else has more information than me. What? And they don't know how to handle themselves. But the reality is, could you imagine how much less blood pressure medicine we'd have to take if we just let things be and not worry about that? How does she know she didn't misunderstand the conversation? Well, that's true too. Someone witnessing it, and that's the problem. Actually, that's a very good point, Jesse, in the sense that someone, especially given those two personalities, they could have been putting on a show that someone who just walked in that has no idea who they are just saw something, and then the pastor's wife goes about saying, "Did you see what they did?" And this is how it happens, right? I was on my porch when the fire started. There was no explosion, but people believe there was an explosion, right? All because someone said, and that's not directly towards a person, but that in itself is a slanderous statement because it's not, you don't even know.
Like, so a former member of ours that now lives in Wyoming keeps answering the question. People are asking her, how did it start? How did it start? And she keeps saying on social media, there was a bonfire in the neighbor's yard. And I want to jump in and be like, there wasn't, but I don't know. I mean,
Right.
I don't know if it's my place to correct her. I don't know the people she's talking to. She doesn't know, but it bugs me that there's false information.
All right, I'm gonna do my best at being an artist here. I don't know how good I'm gonna be, but imagine this being a person, and they're carrying this huge bag here, and then there's this small, these are bags, okay? And that's a person. It looks like a big blob, but
What face? Tell which side. There you go. Are they happy?
yeah, oh my gosh, who invited the pastor's wife? All right. All right. So anyway, this is just an illustration for thinking about how we look at other people. We tend to focus. So this bag here is other people. Other people's faults. And perhaps you've fallen victim to this before to yourself, in that you go so fixated on what other people are doing, right? And what do you forget about? Well, what's on your back? Your own faults and problems. And so the reality of it is we all have much more baggage. And honestly, I do believe at the heart of the eighth commandment being broken is so that we look better. And we're trying to convince ourselves in our own heads that I am better than what, kind of like the Pharisee. At least I'm not as bad as that sinner. As that sinner can't even lift up his eyes to the Lord. He's the one actually who deserves more praise because he is repenting. Okay. Another illustration that I think is helpful is just, this is a mental image. So picture yourself sitting by a serene pond and it's glass. You have this beautiful reflection. There's no wind. It's absolutely still. And you pick up a stone and throw it into that water. What does it do? Right. And how far does it go? It goes all the way. And in fact, what it does is it will hit the next object and completely surround it in that chaos of disturbed water. And then whatever it touches, it then bounces back and continues that until it completely dissipates. That is a good image, I believe, of when you throw a spoken word at someone, just how deep it can really impact many aspects of their lives, especially when you have no idea what they're dealing with. You know, just think how flippant they are. You know, like the guy that ran into my house, probably very high anxiety alert, maybe had memories of a fire of his own and how someone didn't go get someone and they thought someone was not home, and that person ended up dying. You know, maybe that's what they're dealing with. And so here I was in my self-righteousness saying, yep, I know there's a fire, duh, I can see it, and angry that this guy's in my house instead of being thankful, right? So that's something that I think is important, just taking the time to slow down and say, okay, what's this person dealing with? And it's hard, especially when you don't have the time to work it out with them, because a lot of times people will do something dumb to you and they're moving on with their lives. And that's another point with this. As they move on with their lives, what are you doing? Stewing. So who's the one with the problem? You are. So the Bible tells us to speak the truth in love. And what does that mean? It means to speak truthfully to others for their well-being, to build others up. It includes gently admonishing and helping people through. And so it is about telling the truth, but we do so in love. And a big part of this, as Luther points out with the eighth commandment, is to put the best construction on everything. And that's kind of what I was getting at, taking the time to say, okay, what's this person dealing with? Am I thinking about it? Because here's another part of it. Anytime someone says something to you or does something to you, you're interpreting it through your own experiences and your own behavior. And so sometimes that could be calling you out in your own mind, and you're struggling with that, and you're wondering, okay, how do I deal with that? But Luther talks about the best construction. And as I teach the confirmation kids, sometimes the best construction is to keep your mouth shut. Sometimes the best construction is to say nothing at all. You know, we've come across that a little bit as we communicate with people about, you know, the events of the last couple of days and how people have been talking about this or that with relationships and helping people out. And as Molly and I were talking today, it's not the time to have a theological conversation. And the best construction in the moment is just keep my mouth shut. Let someone express what they want to express in the moment, And then over time, if there's ever the opportunity, then we can have a better conversation about it.
Well, the stupid rumor we heard that night about fist flying between the
Right.
neighbors, and then come to find out she wasn't even.
No. Yeah, right. But small town social media starts throwing stuff around.
But we kept.
There was no fight.
There was a domestic,
The
the neighbors.
the neighbors weren't fighting. There was a lot of yelling because there were a lot of dogs to go fetch. But, all right, 9th and 10th commandments then, as you saw, I wrote it on the board. 9th and 10th commandment is God's desire for us to be content with all that we have, not to covet. He wants us to be content with the gifts that he sustains our lives with. And what are some of the reasons that people are not content with what God has given them? They're not content because we're always comparing ourselves with either what we have as an ideal way of life, or, especially in our Western culture, someone always has something better than us. This is one of the struggles in the church doing mission work. One of the ways of doing mission work before was to bring people over to our seminaries, for instance, to train them here in our seminaries and then send them back to their countries. Well, you take someone out of a much lesser developed country, for instance, bring them to the United States, where they get westernized in that short amount of time, what do you think is going to happen? They don't want to go back, and they get westernized. Whereas if you want to find some of the most content people that I have heard of and seen witness of are the people that have very little, and they've never known of more because that's all they have. And this is where mission work sometimes can go awry, because we think through our lenses of, oh, this is what would make me content. So I know of a mission project once where they had met and heard of a tribe in some African country, and the church came together, raised money, and sent them a tractor because they were farmers and they figured, oh, a tractor would be great for them. So then a few years later, some people from this church took a mission trip to go visit the community and see how things were going. And lo and behold, wouldn't you know, the tractor has never been used. And it was never used because no one took the time to see what that community was about. And had they started using the tractor, it would have completely ruined their land, the way their land is and the way they do their farming. So, the contentment, when we look at it through our own lenses of what we think we should have, is oftentimes skewed. And if you want to meet some of the most content people, oftentimes it's people that have little. Now, that doesn't mean people can't be content when they have much, but there is this little known Bible illustration that says it'll be very difficult. It'll be easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than it is for a rich man to go to heaven. And the teaching that Jesus is talking about there is the more you have, the less content you are, because you're always worried, right? You're worried about either someone taking your stuff or maintaining this image and reality of life that you have. So at the heart of contentment, I would say, is the conscience, obviously. But contentment is always going to come down to thought, and you're either going to have sinful thoughts or faithful thoughts. And sinful thoughts always lead to sinful actions. Faithful thoughts will lead you to more sources of faithful thought. But it does. Faithful. It says faithful. Jenna saw it. She could read it. Okay. So, and you heard me use the word conscience, and we used conscience all the way back at the beginning of our conversation too, many weeks ago, because the conscience is a very important part of who we are as God's children. And whatever we are filling our minds with is going to be what fills our conscience. And so if we are constantly filling our conscience with what everyone else has and what everyone else is doing, and anything and everything in between, then we're always going to struggle, because we're going to be telling ourselves either I'm not good enough or I'm somehow a failure or something along those lines. And it's difficult because when you're in the midst of conversations and people are talking about this or that and how they get to experience this or that, or they're going here or there and you don't get to do that, it's very easy to get caught up with that. And very quickly, your mind goes to, this is really crappy. I don't ever get to do any of this. And then that just leads back into the self-pity. And the devil really likes that, because the more he can keep you focused in on yourself, then he's going to be able to drive you into despair deeper and deeper and pull you further away from being faithful. So that's a very quick look at 9th and 10th commandments. Any questions about 9th and 10th commandments, coveting?
How do you get your brain to stop doing that?
How do you get your brain to stop
Yourself
comparing?
about other people or what you see?
Well, I would say that's, I think it would be okay to say that if that's the type of thought that you find yourself struggling with often, it's similar to any other type of addiction. And when that temptation is there, you first and foremost have to pray, Lord, take this thought away from me. Let me be content with what I have. And let me see the blessing of what you are giving to me in and through this. Because much like what I talk about, even like in the circumstance of what I said at the prayer service, in the midst of darkness, God comes to us and we're reminded of what our eternity is, so that even in the midst of all of this mess, because God doesn't promise to take us out of the mess, he promises to see us through it. He promises us the way of escape, right? That's what the passage is when it talks about he will not give us anything that's beyond our ability. Well, it's kind of a facetious statement, because he actually does. Life is beyond our ability. Eternal life is beyond our ability. Dealing with sin is beyond our ability, but he has given us the escape. And so we must lean on that at all times. It doesn't matter which commandment it is, no matter what law we are breaking or what urge we're feeling to be selfish and focus on myself. It's about stopping and saying, okay, Lord, please help me through this. Help me see the blessings of it. And it may not go away right away. You're still going to deal with the emotional part of it. I had one of these conversations again. It just reminded me of how, but at the same time, I think a good question would be is, how different would your life be if you could do everything that person was just talking about? Would your life be better? Probably. Well, sometimes I guess maybe you could look at it that way, but not really, because it's what's the implication of that? The implication is that your life is somehow not good and blessed the way it is. Right? Somebody told me Wall Street fell, but we were so poor that we couldn't tell.
It's a poem.
It's a poem. It's an Alabama song.
Oh.
Somebody told me Wall Street fell, but we were so poor that yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, if you're not paying attention, I don't pay attention to Wall Street, but Jesse, if you were in class in person,
Sing it to us.
you could sing it to us.
Sound.
And then you could also expand this conversation a bit. So I understood the point behind it that you were making, because I'm not always quick to catch on. But nonetheless, all right, we're closing in on the end of our hour. The close of the commandments is what's left for the 10 commandments. Let me just quickly cover that so that the next time we come together, we can dive into the creed. The creed is actually one of my favorite things to teach, just because it is such a beautiful part of our Christian faith. But the close of the commandments is just a very forthright statement of God telling us that he refuses to share us with any other gods. This points us all the way back to the first commandment. When God says, "You shall have no other gods," that doesn't mean that he is above this God, this God, this God, this God. He says, no other gods. And that's what the close of the commandments that Luther gives us is Exodus chapter 20. I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sin of the fathers to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commandments. And then the meaning, the first statement of the sentence of the meaning, God threatens to punish all who break these commandments. And that's a very forthright part of what God is teaching us. We don't like it because we all know that we break the commandments. We don't live as he wants. Isaiah 42:8 is, I am the Lord, that is my name, my glory I give to no other, nor my praise to carved idols. So when I say God refuses to share us with any other God, that's what that's getting at, is that very verse. Some people really struggle with this idea that God will punish, because some people like to just throw it in the face of Christians that, well, if your God is such a loving God, why would he create people only to punish them? He doesn't do that. In fact, God doesn't. Some people will say, why would he create anyone to send them to hell? God doesn't. The rejection of faith, the rejection of God, the rejection of Jesus is what sends people to hell. Just like if you tell your child, don't run in front of a car, and they run in front of a car, did you cause that child harm? No, you told them what not to do, and they chose to do the opposite and brought harm upon themselves. That out of Christian love, that's what ultimately we're looking for, is to lay down things that guide our children in the right direction, and then even as one another to each other to
In
help.
both cases, grieves
Correct. Right.
with God.
Right. If you're going to break my rules, it causes me harm to inflict punishment upon you, to give you a consequence, right? Usually, when you've given a consequence, it usually hurts you more. You don't like to see your child upset. You don't like to see them hurting. Or maybe it was a consequence where it affects everyone. If this,
The case of running in front of the car.
well, right,
It's not, it's their own actions, but it grieves the parents.
right.
And when we bring harm upon ourselves because of our actions, it grieves God.
Correct. Because that's the thing, is God is not sitting there being like, who can I punish? No, it is very much grieving him when he needs to punish in that regard. In the midst of all of this, what we must remember is grace and mercy. God's grace and mercy flows through all of this. And it's good to have the definition of those. Grace is getting what you don't deserve, and mercy is not getting what you do deserve. So God's grace, getting what you don't deserve, is, you hear me say it all the time. How are you, Pastor? I'm better than I deserve. Why? Because as a sinner, poor miserable sinner, I deserve death. But today I am better than I deserve because God has blessed me with another day of life. And I have yet to fall to the temporal consequence of sin, which is death. But even in that death, I know that there is mercy because I am given what I don't deserve, right? And I'm not getting eternal death. I'm not getting what I deserve, but I'm getting, on behalf of what Jesus has done for me, I am looking forward to the blessing of eternal life when I will spend eternity with God in heaven. All right, so that was really quick through that. Any questions that you might have? And if not now, remember, if you're online, everyone's muted, so type it in. But you can also text or email me throughout the week if a question comes up. So we will meet next week. That's an extra week. And then, like I said, we can have a chat and see if we want to add another week or so on. I'm more than willing to do that just to continue to learn. Otherwise, we can pause and put it on hold and continue in the fall. Thank you, Jesse, for sending me the link of the Alabama song. I'll listen to that tonight so I can learn the song. Huh?
It's not called Wall Street Fell.
No, it is called Song of the South.
Like the Disney song?
Song of the South. Yeah. So I think the only era songs that I have going through my head of that time is Oak Ridge Boys songs. I wasn't overly familiar with Alabama, but I think Oak Ridge Boys and Alabama were kind of contemporaries, weren't they? Yeah, I think so. I don't know, whatever. Sweet potato pie, shut my mouth. Okay. That must be another song lyric.
He's just calling you sweet potato pie.
Oh.
And then saying you shut his mouth.
Same song, he says.
Oh,
Okay. All right. Mr. Beckman, I'm sorry about all of this chaos that you get to witness in the midst of this, but thank you for joining online as well. Thank you, all of you that tuned in. I'll see you next week. The same link should be there. You should already have the link to that for next week, and then we will continue on. But if you want to do a little working at the creed, looking at the creed, maybe even looking at your catechism a little bit, and come with any questions that you might have. Have a good rest of the night, and God's blessings to you all.